Flight attendant tells black girl to wait at the back. Then she sees her in the cockpit minutes. Before we dive into the story, please hit the subscribe button. Also, drop a comment and let us know which city you're watching from. We love hearing where our community is tuning in from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Lena Reynolds stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the crisp edges of her suit, her fingers trembling just slightly. It wasn't the first time she had worn a suit to work, nor was it the first time she had faced a critical day at her job. But today, the weight of her nerves felt different. Today, she was stepping into the role she had dreamed of for over a decade. The first woman to ever lead a team of engineers in the high-stakes, male-dominated world of space exploration. Lena's career had not been handed to her. She had fought for every inch. As the daughter of a mechanic who spent his life fixing engines, Lena had always been captivated by the idea of machines, big, complex, and powerful. While other girls in her neighborhood played with dolls or painted their nails, Lena could be found in her father's workshop, her hands smeared with grease as she watched him repair everything from old cars to malfunctioning electronics. Her father always encouraged her. "Machines don't care about your gender," he'd say. "They either work or they don't. You make them work." But the world outside her father's workshop didn't share his view. The first time Lena stepped into a physics class in college, her professor looked at her with skepticism. "Lena, are you sure you want to take this class?" he asked, his tone laced with doubt. "This field's not really for someone like you." Her classmates didn't make things any easier. Her male peers whispered behind her back, questioning her intellect, making bets about how long she would last. She had to prove herself at every turn, working harder, studying longer, never taking a moment for granted. But it was worth it. She graduated at the top of her class, armed with not just a degree, but the relentless drive to silence every doubt that had ever been cast on her ability. The years that followed had been a blur of late nights in labs, endless simulations, and grueling evaluations. She had joined the prestigious aerospace company Astratech as an engineer, where her expertise quickly earned her recognition. But it wasn't enough. There were always whispers about how she didn't fit the role, how a woman, especially a woman of color, could never lead a team of the best and brightest engineers in the company. But Lena wasn't about to let those whispers drown her. She worked harder than anyone else, becoming a rising star in the company. She had the highest performance metrics, developed groundbreaking projects, and earned every inch of respect she gained. Still, none of that mattered when it came to getting that coveted promotion. Today, the company had announced that it was offering the position of lead engineer for the Mars mission to someone new. To Lena's surprise, she was chosen, but not without resistance. Her peers and some of the senior management had made their objections known, whispering in the halls, questioning whether a woman could handle the pressure. The most vocal critic was Robert Harrison, an experienced engineer who had been at Astratech for decades. He had been passed over for the role that Lena now held, and he made no effort to hide his contempt. His voice boomed throughout the office whenever he entered a room, his presence commanding attention, often overshadowing Lena's quieter, more reserved demeanor. Robert would joke about Lena's promotion, calling it a token hire, and making sure the entire department knew he thought she wasn't ready for such a monumental task. Today was to be the first day Lena would lead her team on a critical project, an experimental engine designed for Mars. This was more than just a job. It was a test of everything she had worked for. If she succeeded, the company would have no choice but to recognize her capabilities. But if she failed, the consequences would be far more significant than just one missed project. It could end her career. Lena gathered her thoughts, staring into the mirror, breathing in and out slowly. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, tightening the tie around her neck. She ran her fingers over the polished brass buttons on her blazer, each stripe a silent testament to her success. Today, she would prove them wrong. Today, she would show them all. The elevator doors slid open, and Lena stepped out, her heels clicking firmly on the polished marble floors of Astratech's headquarters. She adjusted her jacket as she passed through the bustling corridors, greeting familiar faces along the way. Her heart was racing, but her exterior was calm, an armor she had perfected over the years. Today was different, though. Today, she was no longer just an engineer. Today, she was the leader. As Lena entered the conference room, the team was already gathered. The sharp, sterile scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as she walked to the head of the table. Her team, mostly male, fell silent, some not even bothering to meet her gaze. Robert was seated at the far end of the table, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. It didn't take a genius to see the contempt in his eyes. "Good morning." "Everyone," Lena began, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension in the room. "I'm excited to start working with all of you on this project. We have a huge responsibility ahead of us with the Mars mission, but I believe in each one of you, and I know we can do this together." A few nods came from the younger engineers, but Robert's silence was deafening. He barely looked up from his tablet. The atmosphere was thick with skepticism. Lena could feel her palms beginning to sweat, but she wouldn't let that show. She had fought too hard to get here. She was ready for this. She had to be. She cleared her throat and continued. "Our first task will be to finalize the engine specifications. We need to make sure that every component of the engine can withstand the extreme conditions on Mars. There's no room for error." Lena outlined the first steps of the project with precision, her eyes scanning the room, gauging each team member's response. She could tell that some of them were beginning to warm to her leadership, but there was still resistance. Robert, in particular, remained dismissive, rolling his eyes when she presented an updated simulation result. "Lena, these numbers don't add up," Robert interrupted, his voice loud and condescending. "Maybe you missed something. Are you sure you double-checked everything?" Lena's breath hitched. It was a question she had heard too many times before. "Are you sure?" It was always about her being sure. Never about her qualifications, her skills, or her record. Just about her ability to prove herself over and over again. "I'm sure, Robert," Lena replied, forcing herself to remain calm. "I ran the numbers twice, and I've already checked the calculations with the team. Everything is in order." Robert gave her a pointed look, but didn't argue further. It was as though his silence was a form of quiet sabotage. But Lena refused to let his tactics derail her. She'd faced this before, and she would face it again. She would rise above it. She always had. The meeting continued, and Lena did her best to keep the focus on the work at hand. She assigned roles to each team member, ensuring that everyone knew their responsibilities. Despite the tension, things went smoothly, and by the end of the meeting, Lena felt like she had gained a small victory. But the real test would come later. Robert's subtle undermining wouldn't stop after one meeting. She knew that, but as she left the room, she took a deep breath and told herself, "I've got this." As Lena made her way back to her office, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of a glass wall. For a moment, she couldn't recognize the woman staring back at her. The woman who had always had to fight for every inch. The woman who had never been allowed to rest, who had never been allowed to relax, because the world had always demanded more. But then she smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there. She wasn't just Lena anymore. She wasn't just fighting for respect or recognition. She had earned it. The weight of her father's words came back to her in that moment. Machines don't care about your gender. They either work or they don't. The machines didn't care about her struggle, but they did care about her competence. Lena wasn't just going to make them work. She was going to make them soar. With that thought, she set her gaze forward and walked with renewed confidence down the hall, ready to face whatever came next. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, calculations, and technical discussions. Lena worked tirelessly, immersing herself in the details of the Mars mission. Every challenge that came her way only fueled her determination. But despite her best efforts, the undercurrent of skepticism from Robert and some of the senior engineers remained. It was as if the entire department was waiting for her to fail, and she couldn't shake the feeling that every move she made was being scrutinized. Robert's subtle undermining continued. At every meeting, he would question her decisions, often redirecting attention away from her contributions and towards the supposed flaws in her plans. When she proposed a new design for the engine's cooling system, Robert raised his voice, dismissing it as too experimental. "Lena, we're talking about life support systems here," he said, sneering. "I think we should stick with the tried and tested, not some innovative solution that's never been done before." But Lena didn't flinch. She knew the risks, but she also knew that true progress required innovation, even at the cost of failure. She had seen it in her father's work, in the way he had taken old, broken engines and turned them into machines that could soar. Innovation was in her blood. She had earned her place here, and she was not going to let Robert or anyone make her doubt that. "Robert," Lena said calmly, maintaining her professional composure, "this design is based on extensive simulations, and the data backs it up. I understand your concerns, but this is the direction we need to take to make the engine efficient enough to handle the extreme conditions of Mars." Her voice remained steady, but inside she could feel the familiar rush of frustration building up. Why was it that her ideas were always met with resistance, while the same suggestions from others were often celebrated? Why did she have to prove herself again and again, while her colleagues, particularly Robert, were allowed to make mistakes without consequence? As the days turned into weeks, Lena's confidence in her technical abilities grew, but the emotional toll was starting to show. There were moments when she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, the pressure to succeed not just for herself, but for every woman and minority who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Each time Robert dismissed her ideas or questioned her competence, it felt like a personal attack, and yet she couldn't let herself retaliate. She had to rise above it. She had to be the better person. She found herself working longer hours, often staying at the office late into the night, long after the rest of the team had left. In the silence of the empty office, Lena pored over calculations, testing and retesting the simulations. She didn't trust anyone else to handle the mission with the same meticulous care she did. But even in those quiet moments, when she was alone with her thoughts, there was no escape from the deep-seated doubt that continued to chip away at her confidence. Her phone buzzed one evening while she was in the middle of a simulation. The message was from her mother. "Dinner at 7 I'm making your favorite." Lena stared at the screen for a moment before replying. "I'll try to make it, but I have a lot of work to do." She knew her mother wouldn't understand. Lena's success in her career was a point of pride for her family, but it came at a price. The same price that Lena had paid for years, time away from the people she loved, missed moments, and the constant gnawing feeling that she wasn't doing enough. She typed a quick response, promising to come for a short visit. Her mother's constant reminders about family and balance weighed heavily on her. She had heard the same advice for years. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Take care of yourself." But Lena couldn't help it. She was always trying to prove something, always trying to make up for the doubts that others had planted in her head. As she drove to her mother's house later that evening, Lena replayed the events of the day. Robert had been particularly difficult, dismissing another one of her suggestions and undermining her in front of the team. She was starting to wonder if she would ever gain his respect, if she would ever gain anyone's respect. When she arrived, her mother greeted her with a warm smile and a hug, but Lena could see the concern in her eyes, the same concern that had been there every time she came home late, every time she looked exhausted. "You look like you've been running on empty," her mother said as they sat down at the dinner table. The aroma of Lena's favorite homemade pasta filled the room, but Lena barely noticed. She was too consumed by the thoughts racing through her mind. "It's just work," Lena replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's a lot of pressure, but I'm handling it." Her mother studied her for a moment, then asked gently, "Are you sure?" "It's okay to take a step back if it's too much, Lena. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." Lena's heart ached at her mother's words, but she quickly pushed the feelings away. "I do. I have to prove that I belong. I have to show them that I'm the best person for this job. I won't let them push me aside." Her mother sighed, placing a hand on Lena's. "I know you're strong, sweetheart. But strength doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders alone." Lena felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to tell her mother that she didn't have a choice, that every day was a battle to prove herself worthy of the title she held, that every step forward was met with resistance, and she couldn't afford to falter. But instead, she just nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Mom. I promise." After dinner, Lena returned to the office feeling more drained than ever. The weight of her family's concern, combined with the pressure at work, was starting to suffocate her. She found herself at a breaking point, unsure how much longer she could keep up this facade of confidence. Days passed, and the project continued to face setbacks. Despite Lena's efforts, the mission was starting to feel like it was slipping from her grasp. Robert's criticisms grew sharper, and his allies within the team started to speak out against her decisions. It wasn't until one fateful meeting that everything came to a head. The team had gathered to review the final blueprint for the Mars mission's engine. Lena had spent weeks refining the design, pouring her heart and soul into every detail. But when she presented it to the team, Robert seized the opportunity to undermine her work yet again. "This is a disaster," Robert scoffed, flipping through the pages of her proposal. "It's too risky. We need something safer, something proven." The room fell silent. Lena felt her hands begin to shake. She had expected criticism, but this felt personal. The weight of his words crashed down on her, pushing her to the edge. For the first time in her career, she felt like she was about to break. "Robert," Lena said, her voice trembling, "I've double-checked everything. This design is not just safe. It's the most efficient solution we've got." But Robert didn't listen. He continued to belittle her, dismissing every effort she had made. The room seemed to close in on her, the voices of her colleagues fading into the background. All she could hear was Robert's taunting words, each one a reminder of the battle she had been fighting for so long. And then, just as she thought she might lose control, something inside her snapped. She stood up from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room fell silent. For a moment, Lena wasn't sure what she was going to say. But then the words came, clear and forceful. "I've had enough," she said, her voice steady. "I've put up with this for far too long. I've worked harder than anyone else in this room, and I will not let anyone question my competence. If you think this design is a disaster, then show me a better one. Otherwise, I suggest you keep your criticisms to yourself and let me do my job." The room was still. For a moment, no one moved or said anything. Then, Robert opened his mouth to argue, but Lena spoke before he could. "I'm done explaining myself. You want results? You'll get them. And when we launch this mission and it succeeds, I'll be the one in the captain's seat, leading us to Mars." With that, she turned and walked out of the meeting, leaving the stunned team behind. As she made her way back to her office, Lena felt a surge of emotion, relief, anger, and pride, all mixed together. She had stood up for herself, and for the first time, it felt like she had finally claimed her place. But the hardest part was still ahead. Lena closed her office door with a soft click, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. She could still feel the weight of her words from the meeting hanging in the air. Her heart raced. She had finally stood up for herself, confronting the resistance that had shadowed her every move. Yet now, alone in her office, doubt crept in. Had she done enough? Would they finally respect her? Or would this only deepen her isolation? Her hands trembled as she sat down at her desk, her eyes falling on the design displayed on her screen. She knew she had done the work. She had perfected every detail of the engine design, giving it everything she had. And yet, despite all of the emotional weight of constant doubt from her colleagues, from those who should have been her allies, still lingered. The whispered conversations, the dismissive glances, the constant questioning of her abilities, it wore her down. For the first time in years, Lena felt the crushing weight of doubt that she had buried deep inside her. Could she really do this? Could she lead a team to Mars when she was always fighting to prove her worth? The dream that had once seemed so clear now felt distant, as if she might never reach it. The soft knock on the door broke the silence. Lena straightened up, quickly wiping away the tears that had threatened to fall. She couldn't let herself fall apart. Not now. Not when she had come this far. "Come in," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. It was Sarah, her colleague, and one of the few people who had always believed in her. Sarah had been there for countless late nights, poring over calculations, reviewing designs, and sharing in the struggle of being a woman in a male-dominated field. They had grown close, their bond strengthened by the shared weight of the journey. "I heard what happened in the meeting," Sarah said, concern written on her face. "Are you okay?" Lena shook her head and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Sarah. Just another day." But Sarah wasn't fooled. "Lena, I know you. You've been holding it all together for so long, but you can't keep pushing yourself like this. You need to talk about it." Lena looked down at her hands, Sarah's words sinking deep. She had been holding it together for years, trying to convince everyone around her, and maybe herself, that she was unshakable. But inside, it felt like everything was slowly crumbling, the weight of the fight threatening to break her. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Every day, it's like I have to fight to prove that I belong here. And I don't know how much longer. I can keep fighting, especially when it feels like I'm doing it all alone." Sarah stepped forward, sitting beside her and gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Lena. You've got me, and you've got so many people who believe in you, even if it doesn't always feel like it. But you can't. Keep doing this for everyone else. You've got to do it for yourself. Don't let them wear you down." Lena felt tears well up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. Sarah's words felt like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge. For years, she had fought not just for her success, but for every woman who had ever been told she wasn't good enough. For every person who had been told their dreams were too big. But in doing so, she had forgotten why she started this fight in the first place. "I've been so focused on proving them wrong," Lena admitted, her voice trembling. "I forgot why I'm here. I want this. I've worked my entire life for this moment. But somewhere along the way, I got so caught up in trying to fight them that I lost sight of why I started." Sarah smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "That's the Lena I know. You've always had that fire. Don't let anyone, especially Robert, put it out. You belong here. Don't let them tell you otherwise." Lena sat in silence, absorbing Sarah's words. There was a shift inside her, a realization that she didn't need to prove anything to anyone except herself. She wasn't fighting for their approval anymore. She was fighting for the dream she had carried since childhood. The dream of leading a crew to Mars. The dream of making history, not for herself alone, but for every person who had been told their dreams were impossible. "I'm going to finish this," Lena said, her voice steady. "I'm going to finish it for me. And when we land on Mars, I'll know it wasn't because of their approval. It'll be because I earned it. I'm not letting them take that from me." Sarah's smile widened. "That's the Lena I've been waiting for. You've got this." The next few weeks were a turning point for Lena. With newfound determination, she threw herself into the project. She stopped trying to appease Robert and those who doubted her. She stopped seeking validation from others and instead relied on her own instincts, knowledge, and passion for the mission. She didn't need anyone's approval. She was doing this for herself. The engine design that had once been dismissed as too risky now showed real promise. The simulations, which had once failed, were now producing results that exceeded expectations. With every success, Lena's confidence grew. She was no longer fighting to prove herself to others. She was proving to herself that she could achieve greatness on her own terms. But even with her newfound strength, there were still moments when Robert's criticism threatened to shake her resolve. During a critical meeting just before the mission launch, he once again questioned her plans. "Lena, I think we should revisit the heat distribution calculations. This system is too new. We don't have the data to support it," he said, his voice laced with doubt. Lena's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. "Robert, I've already run the numbers. I've double-checked everything, and the simulations have proven this system will work. It's not about if it will work. It's about trusting the work we've done and moving forward." The room fell silent. Robert stared at her, frustration evident on his face. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." Lena didn't flinch. "I don't need your warning, Robert. I need your support. And if you can't offer that, then I suggest you step aside." The room was still, but Lena felt a shift. For the first time, she felt no fear. She had spoken her truth, and they were listening. As the days ticked down to launch, Lena's team began to fall into place. Robert, despite his reluctance, began to respect her. The engineers who had once doubted her now sought her advice. Even the senior members of the team were starting to see her for the visionary she was. The night before the launch, Lena stood alone in the quiet of the control room, the countdown clock ticking relentlessly. Tomorrow, they would take their first step toward Mars, and tomorrow, Lena Taylor would be the one leading them there. She smiled to herself. The mission was hers, and she was ready. The launch was scheduled for 8 a.m., but Lena had arrived at the spaceport hours before. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Engineers, technicians, and scientists moved around in a whirlwind of activity, their excitement mingling with the underlying tension that came with the magnitude of what was about to happen. Lena stood, alone for a moment, her gaze locked on the rocket, the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifices, and relentless ambition. The giant structure loomed against the darkening sky, its presence more monumental than she could have ever imagined. This was it, the beginning of a journey to Mars, a dream she had held for so long. The weight of it was almost suffocating, but she felt calm, a quiet assurance deep within her. "Captain Taylor?" A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Sarah, her voice tinged with concern. "You okay? You've been here for hours." Lena turned to face her, a soft smile forming. Sarah had been with her through every step of this journey, not just a colleague, but a sister in every sense. "I'm good, Sarah," she replied, her eyes still fixed on the rocket. "Just soaking it all in. I've dreamed of this for years, but now that it's happening..." She paused, the enormity of the moment almost overwhelming. "It's surreal." "I know," Sarah said, stepping closer, her voice steady and reassuring. "But you've worked for this. You've earned this. It's yours now. They can't take that from you." Lena's heart lightened at Sarah's words, the knot in her chest slowly loosening. "Thanks. I needed to hear that." The countdown clock, relentless and unforgiving, continued its march towards zero. Each second felt like an eternity, but as the minutes dwindled, Lena's confidence solidified. This was her moment. The world had waited for it. And now, it was time to show them that it had all been worth it. The hum of the mission team's voices behind her, checking systems, confirming numbers, drowned out the silence for just a moment. But as the final minutes ticked away, Lena approached the terminal. Her team, gathered around the screens, gave her nods of reassurance. Even Robert, who had doubted her from the start, stood with a reserved respect in his eyes. There were no words needed now. His stance alone spoke volumes. "Ready to make history?" Lena asked, her voice firm but laced with the weight of the moment. The room went silent for a beat, then the murmurs of agreement filled the space. The team was ready. With a final glance at the clock, the countdown reached 0, and the room fell into a tense quiet. Lena turned to the live feed, her eyes locked on the rocket as it prepared for liftoff. The seconds seemed to stretch, each one heavier than the last, until the engines roared to life. A deep rumble vibrated through the floor, the ground shaking beneath them as the rocket began to ascend. The roar of the engines, deafening and powerful, lit up the sky. The rocket's fiery tail cut through the dark morning air, lifting toward the heavens. Lena's chest tightened as her heart swelled with pride. This was it. She had led her team to this moment. "Mission Control, this is Captain Taylor." Lena's voice came through, steady, calm. "Rocket launch successful. All systems go." The reply came through the comms, a voice she recognized immediately. "Roger that, Captain. Congratulations. On a flawless launch, proceed to Phase 2. Lena nodded, even though no one could see her. Years of hard work had brought them here, and nothing was going to stand in her way. Just as she turned back to her team, a sudden alarm cut through the air. A voice, cold and authoritative, broke the silence. "Captain Taylor, this is Mission Control. We've detected an anomaly. A pressure issue has been reported in the propulsion system. We need you to check immediately." Lena's stomach twisted. She had prepared for difficulties, but not this, especially not now, when they were so close. "Roger that, Mission Control," she said, her voice betraying nothing of the panic that had suddenly surged. "Initiating diagnostics now," she snapped. Into action, quickly turning to Sarah and the team. "Get propulsion systems on the line. We need to analyze this immediately. I need that diagnostics report in real time." The room exploded into motion. The technicians scrambled, fingers flying over keyboards as they accessed the critical systems. Lena's eyes darted across the screens, her mind racing as she worked through the data. The pressure anomaly was only the beginning. Something was wrong with the fuel system. It wasn't responding as it should. "Lena, the numbers don't add up," Sarah said, her voice sharp with concern. "This doesn't make sense. It's like the systems are fighting each other." Lena's mind raced. There had been no simulations for this exact scenario. No training had prepared her for this level of uncertainty. She glanced at the live feed again, looking for reassurance, but all she saw was the unwavering rocket, climbing higher and higher toward the unknown. She knew the risks. She had accepted them. But this was different. The moment of truth had come, and it was up to her to guide them through it. "I'm not pulling back," she muttered to herself. "We're not stopping now. We have to fix this." Turning to the team, she gave them a quick, determined look. "We're rerouting the power. Prepare to bypass the secondary systems. Direct everything to the fuel valves. I need all critical systems prioritized." With a deep breath, Lena began to input the commands. There was no room for error now. Everything she had fought for, everything that had been taken from her, all came down to this. Seconds passed, stretching into what felt like hours. The numbers on the screens flickered and fluctuated, the pressure mounting with each passing second. But Lena remained steady. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she never wavered. This was her moment. Then the screen flickered. A green check mark appeared. The systems had stabilized. The fuel had been rerouted successfully. "Mission Control, this is Captain Taylor. The systems are online. We've bypassed the anomaly. All critical systems are operational," Lena reported, her voice calm, almost detached from the chaos she had just navigated. A long pause followed. Then the voice from Mission Control replied, "Understood, Captain. Well done. You've cleared the issue. Proceed with the mission. Phase 2. Go." A cheer erupted from the team, but Lena felt the weight of the moment still pressing on her shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There was still so much left to do. But for now, they had made it through. She turned to Sarah, her eyes meeting her friend's. "We did it. We're on our way." Sarah's face lit up with a relieved, triumphant smile. "We're going to Mars, Lena. You really did it." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lena allowed herself to smile. The journey was far from over, but the moment she had worked for, was hers. As the rocket soared further into the unknown, Lena leaned back in her chair. The sky was no longer an obstacle. It was her domain. The future, finally, was hers to shape.